Welcome to this week's End of Days Update, coming to you from Dodge City, Kansas. We had such a great time the last few days. Good crowds, a lot of people coming to the service. It's so good to see so many people coming on Sunday nights, Monday nights, and Tuesday nights. This is the church that I've been coming to almost 40 years. Crazy. But there's such an anticipation and expectation of Jesus coming back. It's amazing how that fixes so much. He's so good. So we're coming to you every week to look at the different things that point to the coming of the Lord. And we do the EDU every week so that we can see how close we are, so that we get excited. So if you're anywhere near Laconia, New Hampshire, we'll be up there this weekend. We'll have a great time Sunday through Wednesday. We got morning meetings and night meetings. Faith Alive Church in Laconia, New Hampshire. So what we're looking at on the weekly update is what's happening in the world that blatantly shows us how close we are to Jesus coming back. Because the Bible has so many signs, so many markers. There's about 80 signs to the second coming. The rapture's signless. So we look at what's going to happen just after the rapture, and that would be the Ezekiel 38 war. So why would the Lord want us to get into this? I've heard people go, well, now why would you want to talk about end times? Well, it's amazing. It's the hope that purifies you even as you're pure. And when you have an expectation and a hope, it produces great joy. And that joy produces great energy. So we need strength right here at the very end to run our race. And remember demons, when Jesus came walking into town, demons cried out, "Have you come to torment us before the time?" They knew he was on a schedule, but he was early. So if demons can know the time, how much more the church? So we should be well versed in how close we are to his return. Remember, he rebuked them. He said, hey, you can tell what the weather's going to be, but you don't know your hour of visitation. So he wanted them to know. So let's pick up what's happening in Israel. Probably the biggest thing is the huge judicial changes in Israel. I don't think I've ever seen that many people protesting in Israel. So what it is they're coming up with a new way to have their Supreme Court not quite have as much authority over the executive branch or the legislature. In other words, the Knesset can change laws with the proper amount of votes, and man, the whole country's going crazy over it. So Benjamin Netanyahu decided to wait a little bit on that. He even got rid of his defense minister because his defense minister publicly came against him. And the defense minister basically said, I don't like that he said this. He said, but this is a good opportunity for some of our enemies to try to kill us because we're in disarray. But they're not in disarray. Israel knows exactly what they're doing. So weird times for them. In the middle of that, you've got all this stuff happening in the West Bank. I think it was about maybe 6 months ago, I tried to every week talk more and more about the dangers that were going to happen with the West Bank. I mean, you got Hezbollah, you got Hamas, you got the Palestinians literally trying to kill so many individuals that are not warriors, they're just civilians. So Israel's been retaliating and people get mad at them about that, but there's just a lot of changes around the Middle East right now with everything. You've got so much happening with Russia. Today, Russia publicly came out saying they're moving nuclear weapons in Belarus. Why? They'll be just above the Ukraine. So you've got nuclear weapons from Russia below them and above them, and really is to kind of thumb their nose up at NATO. Just as NATO keeps asking more people to come in, there's more people to protect them, Russia keeps touting what they want to do in the region. When I preached in Latvia and Estonia years ago, every single person in Estonia said, we knew that Russia's going to come back in and take over. And you see that happening right now. Why? Because it's in the cards. You had an alliance today with Turkey and China and Russia and Syria, an alignment for just basically the Ezekiel 38 war. You had Saudi Arabia getting contract with China to build one of the largest, $10 billion for an oil refinery in China. So it's weird seeing the people make alliances that you never thought would do it because it's leading up to the coming of the Lord. In the middle of that, you had Iran bomb a couple of our bases again in Syria. We retaliated. You had our defense minister at the Congress today and purposely left off those things that were happening. Some of the senators called him out on it and said, you're lying to us. Why? America's having to fire missiles at Iranian sites in Syria. Remember, Israel's normally having to do that because Iran brings missiles down into Syria, parks them on Israel's shore, and they're ready to fire them at Israel. Israel has to take them out. And usually that's in Damascus. Remember, Isaiah 17:1 says Damascus will be removed from being a city. So this last week you had an asteroid come by. You have 5 planets aligning right now. Interesting, you had the 5 planets aligning, just like you had the 5 countries aligning that are going to be in the Ezekiel 38 war. So it's one thing after another. The main thing that kind of freaks me out is Iran's thought pattern to keep basically taunting America. But I do like that you got World War II stuff, nuclear stuff with airplanes, with China. With today, you had North Korea fire off a missile over the Japan Sea, and it didn't do figure eights, but they said this is a simulation of nuclear war. And then they talked about they have a submarine that releases a torpedo that turns the water into radioactivity. So it's crazy. And the UK brought tanks to the Ukraine. Listen to this. Uranium depleted shells. So you got uranium depleted shells being fired into Russia from the Ukraine. You have all this stuff ratcheting up because Jesus is just about to come back. So every week with all of that happening, what do? We go to the signs. Number 1, Israel made a nation. Number 2, Jerusalem won back. After that, you got the Hebrew language restored. You have the Ethiopian Jews brought back. You got the fertility of the land of Israel. You got the revival of the Roman Empire. You had fish show up in the Dead Sea. You had the Dead Sea turn blood red where Sodom and Gomorrah was. That's amazing. Happened on the Day of Atonement. So you have all these things, the ritual baths around the Temple Mount fill up with water. You have the head of basically the group that's going to rebuild the temple saying they're going to have sacrifices next month on the Temple Mount. You have Netanyahu yesterday talk about we're going to go up on the Temple Mount and we're going to build the third temple. All these things are signs. You have the archway for Baal worship in Palmyra. Russia rebuilt it last year. Why is that a big deal? That's where the Tower of Babel was. Why is that a big deal? The Talmud says that's the last sign you'll see before the coming of the Lord. So blatant, in your face stuff happening all around us, pushing us to go, Jesus is just about to come. So you have many more signs. You have the blood red moons. You had the Bethlehem star. You had Jupiter, Regulus, Venus come together. At the birth of Jesus, the constellation was Virgo. Jupiter's a king planet. Regulus, regal king. Regulus did retrograde motion and crowned Jupiter. Crazy. At the birth of Jesus. Well, this last year, NBC Nightly News said we have the Bethlehem star. What was the constellation? Leo. He's the lion of the tribe of Judah. All of these signs, all these signals point to, I'm skipping over tons of them, point to Jesus is just about to come back. What do? Help our local church, help our local pastor, be engaged. The closer you got to get married, you're on the phone more. Be engaged with Jesus, do his bidding, do his will. We're about to see the King face to face. There is nothing cooler than all of a sudden seeing the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. Wow. Come back next week. We'll look at what all's happening around Israel. So much is happening. Have a blessed, wonderful week. We'll see you next Wednesday.
Thanks for joining us today at the End of Days Update. If you'd like to be notified every time there's a new post, just go to the edu at josephmorris.com and subscribe to receive email alerts. If these posts and updates have been a blessing to you, please consider making a one-time donation to help get the message out, or even becoming a monthly partner with Joseph Morris Ministries. Thanks again for tuning in to the EDU, and we'll see you next week.